Sean, I came across this film of Robert Kennedy, who's now a definite independent candidate in the US presidential race. He's got himself, he's got his candidate VP. The guy's actually going for it. He has a position on war, the consumption of weaponry in war, which is quite dark and quite disturbing. Listen to what he's got to say.
Mitch McConnell was asked, can we really afford to spend $113 billion to Ukraine? He said, don't worry. It's not really going to Ukraine.
It's going to American defense manufacturers.
So he just admitted it's a money laundering scheme. And who do you think owns every one of those companies? BlackRock.
So basically, what Kennedy seems to be saying is, one view of war is two people fall out and they have a battle. Another view of war is there is a machine which actually likes it because it consumes things, which means things have to be remade, which means that money's needed. And this company, this $10 trillion company called BlackRock, sits behind it. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I like all these arguments. There is that you can get polarized. I think there's probably something in the middle. What I don't subscribe to is the view that BlackRock can somehow incite wars. I mean, wars are inherently political, started, but and there's a lot of ex-military who serve in the defense companies. And trust me, everybody of this generation who's been involved in a war does not want to see wars happen again. It doesn't matter about the tools of profit. They've lost colleagues, they've lost friends and the like. But there's no doubt that we are living in a time when BlackRock is becoming incredibly powerful. The defense industries, there's a lot of money flowing into them. And whenever there's money and a huge demand signal, there's often some people who are in it for themselves rather than in it for philanthropic purposes.
Yeah, well said. Well, there's a second bit to this because wars, generally, even long wars, come to an end. What happens then is the countries at war, especially the one that might have lost the most, have to rebuild. That's very expensive, costs a lot of money and makes a lot of money for people. Listen again to what Kennedy says about this.
So Tim Scott, during the Republican debate, said, don't worry, it's not a gift to Ukraine, it's a loan. So raise your hand if you think that loan's ever getting paid back. Yeah, of course it's not. So why do they call it a loan? Because if they call it a loan, they can impose loan conditions. And what are the loan conditions that we impose on? Number one, an extreme austerity program, so that if you're poor in Ukraine, you're going to be poor forever. Number two, most important, Ukraine has to put all of its government-owned assets up for sale to multinational corporations, including all of its agricultural land, the biggest single asset in Europe. In Ukraine, there's been 1,000 years of war fought over that land. It's the richest farmland in the world. It's the breadbasket of Europe. 500,000 kids almost, Ukrainian kids, have died to keep that land as part of Ukraine. They almost certainly didn't know about this loan condition. They've already sold 30% of it. The buyers were DuPont, Cargill, and Monsanto. Who do you think owns all of those companies? Yeah, BlackRock. And then in December, President Biden gave out the contract to rebuild Ukraine. And who do you think got that contract? BlackRock.
So if Kennedy is right, if there's a secondary market, there's the market during war, there's the market after war, and what we see is the asset sell-off that's necessary for Ukraine to pay its loan back because it can't afford to pay with cash, means selling off the assets. Big American organization, conglomerates sit behind that, and as Kennedy said, guess who sits behind that? It's our good friend BlackRock again.
Yeah, and again, I do see this from a slightly more centrist perspective, I think. Whilst I absolutely accept that your argument that this is, a more powerful BlackRock signal behind all this, in a way, if you were to look at it from a half-full perspective, Ukraine, if it emerges from this war, it's going to be absolutely devastated anyway, financially virtually bankrupt. And actually, therefore, how does the West help get Ukraine back on its feet again. And it will be the financial institutions that have to do that. And there's no doubt that the assets that Ukraine has, whether it's minerals, whether it's land, whether it's wheat fields or whatever, fortunately, we live in a society where they have value, and it's a Ukrainian decision as to what they sell off and how they finance it. So I think, for me, I don't see that as necessarily bad. What I do see is that we've got to be really careful about the power in companies like BlackRock. And finally, I would also say, Kennedy, you're in my era. I've been looking for a JFK. Even the Americans are saying we're trying to choose the least worst option politically at the moment. How refreshing it would be to have a younger voice in the fight. My only challenge at the moment is it looks very unlikely, given the political system, that the younger Kennedy is going to have any real run. And what he's actually doing is shouting loudly to try and attract a lot of attention at the moment. I think we've always got to be very careful about people who are just shouting loudly, because behind that veneer, there's a real story. And on the BlackRock, I absolutely believe we have to be careful, but there is a positive message here as well.
One to watch.
Absolutely.